Hello, and welcome back to Objects of New York, a podcast about New Yorkers and the objects we love, whether it's things we found on the street or bought at an antique store or inherited from a weird relative or whatever it may be. This is a show where we like to talk about our stuff. Each episode, I sit down with a special guest and we have a chat and a ramble, and I'm really excited about this week's episode because I got to sit down with my very good friend and upstairs neighbor, Meg McNeal. Meg is first of all, a terrific person. But she is a longtime educator. She is a yoga instructor. She is a Jane of all trades, and we just became fast friends a couple years ago. She's lived in New York for 14 years, 1 year longer than me. And we bonded over a mutual love of antiques and thrifting and old jazz, and I am going to reveal this now. We get together and we play dress up, and we are women who we're grown-ups, and we play dress up, and it's great. So I'm really excited to share this episode today, and let's get started. Hello, Meg.
Hi. Thanks for having me, Ellyn.
Thanks for coming on the show. We're here to talk about stuff. And I was just curious, when I told you about this podcast, was there any object that first leapt to your mind? Like, oh, I think I want to talk about this, or?
There's a few objects, not necessarily ones that I've acquired in New York, but I think one of the more special objects that I inherited from my maternal grandmother is her original copy, not the original copy of A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. But I remember reading that, and it has that smell too, that like book smell that probably has like, many dead bug carcasses in the pages.
I love that.
Yeah, but it has my grandmother's name, Lorraine, Lorraine Moran. And in the little, the beginning, the front page where it's a little adhesive sticker that she put on there when she was younger. But the book was, I think it's from, I think it was 1942. The pages are like perfectly yellowed. And that book was really special, I think, too, because I never thought I'd move to New York. I grew up in Pennsylvania. I grew up in the suburbs. And reading that book was, I thought, really special because it was also the neighborhood that I first moved to when I moved to New York.
A Tree Grows in Brooklyn is also a very important book to me, and is one of the main reasons why I moved to New York as well. I read it for the first time when I was about 12, which I think is when the book kind of starts. Like Francie Nolan is, I think, 10, 11, 12 in the first bit of the book. And then I read it again when I was a teenager, and then again like in my early 20s. And the first time I read that book, I remember thinking, oh, I just have to move to Williamsburg one day. I absolutely have to do it. And then when I got to Williamsburg, I was like, oh, it's not what I thought it would be.
Yeah. I was like, did you live in Williamsburg? Because I
did not ever live in Williamsburg, mostly because I couldn't afford it. But then also the kind of illusion was shattered when I visited it. It was like, oh, this is a scene for me that I don't feel cool in.
Ironically, there's not many trees there.
There's not.
No.
There's more trees on our street, I think.
Oh, so many more.
Do you know the name of the tree that is in A Tree Grows in Brooklyn? I think I just learned this recently.
No, I don't.
It's called the Tree of Life, is like the kind of colloquial name for it. And apparently it's not an invasive species, but they're just kind of everywhere. They're like the most common tree that you see in Brooklyn.
Are they the ones that have that smell?
Those are the ginkgo trees.
Oh, those are the ginkgo.
I think that horrific dog poop smell that we were treated to all of fall and winter apparently happens when like the ginkgo buds fall onto the ground and then people stomp them. And I guess it's how they...
Oh, it releases a smell. But it is the most pretty tree, I think,
it's gorgeous.
On our block, and especially in the fall, and the color yellow.
And it gets like gilded gold.
Yes.
Gorgeous yellow. Well, I'm so glad to hear you say that you have a copy of that book, because I have several and it's very important to me too. And so when did you first move to New York?
It was August 2010. It was a really insane story. My whole decision to move was very, very last minute. So I had been looking for counseling jobs, working as a high school counselor, and interviewed at a ton of places in Philadelphia, a ton of places even internationally. And I was living outside of Philadelphia. I was going through a breakup, and I was just, the world was my oyster. And I got contacted by a school to say, hey, can you come up? I think it was a Tuesday. They're like, can you come tomorrow for an interview? I'm like, oh, okay. So I drove to Trenton, New Jersey, and got on the New Jersey Transit because I was living outside of Philadelphia, and came up, found my way. I remember I was wearing heels, and I remember getting to like the A or C train to connect to the L, and just that stop on what is that, 8th Avenue?
Yeah, yeah.
And those stairs, and I'm like, oh God, I'm in heels, and it's hot.
And then you have to go down that like gangway kind of plank.
Yeah, this long corridor, and then the actual interview wasn't. It was in Williamsburg, but it was more like Greenpoint. It was like closer to the Nassau stop off the G. Mm-hmm. But I walked in heels from the Bedford L. I mean, my feet were destroyed. And it has nothing to do with objects, but it's a good story. That night, I was dating somebody who lived in New Paltz, and I was going up to stay with him for the night. And then they had called me on the train. They're like, "Can you come back tomorrow for another interview?" I was like, "I guess I'm going to Target and buying a dress
and flats."
And I think I just got a lot of Band-Aids, and I got the
We've
job
all
offer.
done that, walking down the street with our feet covered in blood, and like our heels are open, blisters are open. We've all done that.
My feet have been through it. Yeah. But yeah, I got a job offer in that second interview, and then 2 days later, I came back to New York to find an apartment, which I did, and then I left for California 2 days later, and then when I came back from California, I packed up and rented a U-Haul and drove it by myself. On the BQE and sideswiped somebody, and it was just a New York story. My first apartment was in Bushwick, off the Kosciuszko. It was gorgeous, railroad style. Probably could have been a 2-bedroom. This was 2010, so I think my rent was $12.50, and but it was right on Bushwick Avenue essentially, mm-hmm. And it was walking distance to the school. Immediately just signed. And it was a pretty decent spot. I stayed there for a year, and then I moved to Manhattan after that. Then I moved away for a while, mm-hmm. and I'm not going to count that because that wasn't in New York. And then I stayed with a friend for a couple of months when I moved back to the city. And then I found a place across the street with this roommate who was very challenging to live with. Then I found a place in Red Hook by DeFonte's on Columbia Street.
Oh, cool.
And then I moved deeper into Red Hook onto Sullivan Street by Red Hook Tavern. And then I found my place now.
So you've just lived mostly in Brooklyn, a little bit in Manhattan.
Mostly in Brooklyn. Yeah. A year in Manhattan. I loved my year in Manhattan.
Where in Manhattan were you?
Off the East Broadway F. So kind of the border of the Lower East Side, Chinatown. And but it was before it was what it is now, which is just such a hot spot. And there were no lines for brunch, and my bars were 169 Bar, and which is still there, and my date spot was the 10 Bells.
The 10 Bells?
Yeah.
Is that still there?
I believe it's still there. Yeah, it was biodynamic wines and small plates. It was a very good date spot.
I think I'm on apartment number 11.
Wow.
I think my number 11 is my 11th apartment, I think, in 13, 14 years or something like that.
Do you feel like they've all been upgrades?
Yeah. No. It's been an up and down kind of bippity boppity.
Oh, right, because the place you lived before this was above the bread
next door to Mazzola Bakery,
yeah.
The legendary neighborhood baker. We won't say anything bad about them because they're amazing. Their lard bread is legendary. But yeah, my apartment was above the kitchen. Was not revealed. That was not information given to me when I got the place because I was like, oh, it's next door to the bakery. It's not above the bakery. But yeah, my first night there, my bed began to shake, and I could smell the bread baking. I didn't mind the smell of the bread, but the bed was shaking, and I was like,
"Don't want to be Linda Carter."
That's a good reference.
Yeah, Linda with a Y, by the way.
Wonder Woman.
Oh, not Linda Carter. Linda Blair.
Wait, then I don't know this reference. I was also struggling
The
to get
Exorcist. You don't like horror movies?
I don't.
Wait, there was some bed shaking.
Well, were horror movies more like bakery situations?
Yes.
Maybe I wouldn't mind them so much. Anyway, yeah, my bed shook every night, and then my walls were shaking, and it was because of the industrial mixing machines, I'm assuming. And it's a bakery; they have to start, at midnight and bake until 5, 6, 7 until they open at 7 o'clock. So it went on all night, and I just didn't sleep for a whole month. And it was this gorgeous Sex and the City style, like Carrie Bradshaw, huge studio apartment with arched double doors and a washer dryer and this massive walk-in closet. And it was $2,000 a month because it was still kind of in the pandemic. And I was like, this is insane. I'm never leaving. Marble fireplace, a little outdoor patio area. And yeah, the very first night there, the truth was revealed. And
well, fun fact, I almost was your neighbor upstairs.
At 194?
Yeah, because I found...
Oh, that's right.
My former friend lived above you.
Right.
And I remember hearing you on the phone before.
What?
Talking. Yeah, I remember hearing you in the hallway. And I'm like, oh, she sounds nice. And it was funny because I had found that apartment for my friend because she was home in Texas and was moving back. And she's like, I really want to live in Carroll Gardens. I'm like, you're like 24. What? Like, this is not your neighborhood. But
You need a couple of kids.
Yeah,
and a dog.
But she and I thought about living there because I think they were asking $1,900.
Oh my gosh.
For that spot.
For the second floor.
Yeah. Because
apparently
your bed doesn't shake there.
Well, you could. I talked to the third floor neighbors, and they could feel it in their apartment,
really?
but they said it was tolerable. But they were like, "How do you sleep at night?" And I said, "I'm not." And I asked, like, "What did the previous tenant do to about this?" Because I've put down extra rugs, I'm taking sleeping pills, and they're like, "Oh yeah, they didn't sleep there."
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And this is a harsh gear change.
Okay.
So we've talked about your grandmother's book.
Yes.
I want to ask one more question. So let's assume. I know you have a couple of beautiful cats, Michael and Francesca. But your apartment's on fire. Not currently, but just in this hypothetical situation.
It's really not nice to say or suggest
You do,
while I'm not home.
Yeah, and you do have some gas leak issues sometimes.
I do.
Okay. Okay, boy. Well, let's say one of those gas leak issues becomes a bigger problem.
Yeah.
But Mikey and Francesca are safe and your laptop is fine. What is the one object you think that you would grab to save that is either sentimental to you or means a lot to you, or maybe it's the most valuable besides like your laptop phone?
Yeah. It's funny because I think I love things. I like objects, but I feel that the older I get, the less attached I am to specific items. And I'm sort of a good purger as well, but I would probably I would actually grab two things. One is this paperweight full circle elephant that I got at a little vintage shop in Kalk Bay outside of Cape Town, South Africa.
Oh, wow.
And it's just a gorgeous little elephant. And I love elephants. And the other item I would grab is this little locket that I found. So I purchased this locket in New Orleans after I had moved back to New York. And my longtime friend invited me to go to New Orleans and found this little locket. And it's Ganesha, who's the Hindu god of the elephant god. And he is the remover of obstacles. And there's a deeper story there that goes back to one of my yoga trainings. And I had this really intense experience when I did a chakra balancing class during this training. And a lot of things came up for me. And the following day was probably one of the most absurd days of my life. But it was when I realized that Ganesha was there to place obstacles as well as to remove them. And it was almost just, I don't know, what like just a bunch of absurd events happened. When my friends and we got these four-wheelers and we were driving, and this is in Costa Rica. It was like rainy the day before, so it was just everything was covered in mud. And I was driving one solo, and then there were two people on the other one. They got into a crash, and nothing too serious. And we kept on forging along, but we stopped, and these very lovely people helped us and got us some bandages and Band-Aids and wiped off the mud. And we're like, all right, we're going to get back on. And we kept on going. This time I had the second person on the back of my four-wheeler because the other person wanted to drive solo. And then we got to a river. It wasn't really a river. It was just a road that had a river flowing through it because of all the rain. And we're like, I don't know if we can get through this. And, the guy that we were with, he's like, no, we can do it. We can do it. And so he actually just sped both four-wheelers through this river. And then we keep on going, and we're really looking for this black sand beach. And we finally get there, but we only had about maybe 10 minutes to hang out because of all the events that happened along the way. Turned around, come back. It starts raining again. And we get stopped by the police. And I speak Spanish, so I was able to explain what we were doing and why we didn't have our passports and everything. But that was another thing. And then my friend Jacob, he was driving on the way back, and he got into another crash. And I was on the back this time.
Oh, no.
Then we get back to dropping off the four-wheelers. We decide, you know what? We need to actually relax because it's been a kind of a stressful day. We go get massages, and I'm laying on the table post-massage, and there's an earthquake. So it was this moment where I'm like, something's happening. I'm emotionally having a release, but there's also this presence of, you know, again, what I believe to be Ganesha preventing me from doing something. But I felt like it was a very significant event. Next year, again, I'm in New Orleans, find this little locket, and the Ganesha spins. It's just a really chintzy little, almost like a locket box that's glass, and the Ganesha was gold and it would spin inside. Oh. And it was really, really fun and silly and unique. And I loved it. And I wore it all the time. And I think it got wet. It eventually just stuck in place and just kept on falling off the chain all the time. Mm-hmm. I would find it. I was like, oh my God, how did that fall off? And the chain would still be on. Or it fell off in yoga class. Or, you know, I think the last straw was when I was in Brooklyn, walking across Court Street. It fell off my neck again, and it crushed. I think I stepped on it maybe, and it was gone. But then a couple years later, I was working at the Boys Club in New York. I was the education director there, and I was talking about this necklace. And I think maybe the chorus teacher, she was wearing earrings that had these little Ganeshas.
No way.
And I'm like, where did you get those? And she was like, oh, I found them somewhere. I don't even remember
found them on the street. They just keep falling off people's necks.
Yeah. And she's like, I have a bunch at home. And the next day she brought in a little bag with the locket for me. And it was so sweet. And I was so excited to get it back. And at that point, I was so afraid it was going to fall off again. So I would probably grab that as well. It's in my my foyer.
That's great. And it sounds like even if you didn't manage to grab it, you would probably find it again. And it might follow you. Who might find you again?
I think so. Yeah.
Is there anything else that I know you had mentioned, and we just have a couple minutes left, but I want to talk about this. I know that you have kind of a special relationship with keys. In New York City, and I wonder if you could just explain a little bit about that.
Actually, it's so interesting because I think it does actually connect to Ganesha, River of Obstacles. I'm kind of thinking of opening doors. And there have been times in my life where, you know, I've really leaned in hard on trying to manifest opportunities and new experiences in my life. And there was a time where I was in between kind of careers and career paths. And it was the wildest thing. I just started seeing keys everywhere I went. And not hanging off someone's belt loop. I saw a set of keys just teetering on the side of a trash can on 14th Street and Avenue A. Super busy, just hanging out.
Those are the trash keys.
Those are the trash keys. And then there's, believe it or not, there's keys hanging all over Carroll Gardens on the little
I have never seen keys.
They're everywhere. And I would see all types of keys. I would see lots of keys. I would see single keys. I would see the Fisher Price keys that are for chewing on for teething toddlers, and see them hanging in trees.
And you started taking pictures of the keys that you saw, didn't you?
Yeah, actually, I should look that up actually because I have a ton of them.
I would love to see a collection, your collection of key pictures.
My collection of keys, and I think that the one that was really, really odd is that I was sitting on a park bench, and there's practical explanations clearly of why keys end up where they are, but it was just lodged. A set of keys was lodged inside the bench, just hanging out. And I'm like, oh, someone's going to really be upset when they get home because they're not going to have their keys. They're not going to know where they were or went. But I can't. I saw keys, I think it was maybe about 2 months ago, but it's been a while. But I also haven't been in that manifestation space. And I do think that there's symbolism, and those opportunities present themselves in really unique ways.
That's so interesting. And so would you say like when you were kind of more in that mindset that you saw the keys more frequently, or you felt like you saw them? Wow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's sort of like when you're thinking, when you're seeking.
Yeah. Very simply, like when you're thinking about it, you see it more often, don't you, I suppose?
Absolutely.
That is so cool. I hope we can get a collection of your pictures and actually publish them to see.
Oh, that would be,
I think that would be really cool to go along with this.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I don't know that there's any objects that have followed me around. Is there anything else that has followed you around the city that you think you kind of keep seeing?
Not that I can think of.
I mean, I just see street stuff everywhere. And
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that I always find it interesting to kind of, see graffiti or street art and noticing certain patterns or colors, or, it's like, oh, I always see this like heart shape. And it's like, it's probably the same person who drew it, because there's such a specific style.
Have you seen the Protect Your Heart sidewalk drawing? Yeah, that's been there for years.
Yeah, those have been there and that looks more like a stamp,
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, I would say that there are certain things, and I think that New York's full of messages if you're open to receive them.
That's so true. Well, any final thoughts? Any final words?
No, but don't be afraid to pick things up off the street in New York, because that's, most of my book collection.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Same.
And I think I had like a kitchen island. I've got
Me too.
a leather coat.
I've not done that.
Some cute blouses. Yeah. I mean, it's
that giant picture frame. Remember
picture frame that I was going to try to do a living wall. That was a very expensive endeavor.
That would have been like hundreds and hundreds of dollars of
more
fake
than
plants.
that. I mean, only a quarter of it was, not even a quarter. It was like an eighth of it was covered with $200 worth of moss and
horrible.
Yeah.
It's okay. It was a good thought. Well, Meg, thank you so much.
Thank you
for coming on and having a little chat.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. And I love the officialness of this podcast room.
It's pretty nice.
Yeah.
And thank you to Radio Free Rhinecliff for the space.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
See you later.